Welcome back, everyone. BGP. Before we get started, yes, I want to give you information on BGP. The certification only requires that you know eBGP, that you know the theory behind eBGP, now that you know the syntax. I'm going to give it to you anyway, all right? But you don't need to know how to configure it. You need to understand it, okay? Now, BGP is a humongous routing protocol, okay, normally used by ISPs or very large enterprises on their backbone. All right, you need permission if you're gonna share BGP with your ISP because they're gonna bombard you with their routing table. So you better pray that your router is gonna hold. So BGP is not to be taken lightly. All right, the version of BGP that we normally use today is BGP version 4. One of the things with BGP, which is interesting, that it doesn't require for the neighbor to be right next to it. It could be a neighbor on the other side or another subnet somewhere else, where they're called route reflectors. Route reflectors, okay? When you do with BGP, I spoke on this earlier. All right, now BGP uses something called attributes. Attributes, okay? Uh, you can make BGP dance, okay? However you want to get to from point A to point B. We're going to learn the very basics. We're going to do comparisons between eBGP and iBGP. All right, we'll learn basics on eBGP. All right, so there's a lot of stuff that you're going to do that's very basic to extent maybe a little bit large on a network. But again, just understanding what BGP is. All right. A few enterprises use this because it is a huge protocol. BGP uses port TCP 179. All right, BGP does establish a neighbor relationship before exchanging any kind of information, just like any other routing protocol. But remember, it's neighbors because when you do BGP, you do, let's say, BGP or router BGP autonomous system 6500, whatever, 6501. You go neighbor, okay, then the IP address of your neighbor, then the remote autonomous system that neighbor's in. It could be in your same autonomous system, it could be in a different autonomous system, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right, but again, and you can advertise the network that your BGP is advertising. Network, the network you're in, okay, mask, and then the mask you're in, okay, and you can also do the router ID, okay. You can hard code that in there if you want as well. If no path attributes have been configured, BGP will use what's called an autonomous system path. This is simple. Autonomous system path calculation. It'll choose the lowest autonomous system path to get to the destination. All right. So if it's got to go, it's like RIP. Think of it as a RIP, as an analogy. If RIP says, which way should I go? 5 hops or 1 hop? It's going to go 1 hop. Okay. There's many ways to go, but I'm going to take the shortest route to get there. Okay. All right. Now, as far as comparing BGP to eBGP and OSPF logic, all right, forms with neighbor relationships before sending routing information, same thing. Okay. Neighbors typically discovered using multicast packets. Neighbors IP address explicitly configured. You tell it about the neighbors. Okay. Does not use TCP. He uses TCP. I just said that. Port 179. Advertises the prefix and length. Same thing, but they're called NLRIs. NLRIs. Advertises the metric. Here is advertising the path attributes. The path, because there's a million of them. It's a million of them you can use, all right? A path attributes that BGP uses instead of metric to choose the best way to get to where it needs to go. Emphasis on fast convergence, OSPF or eBGP. On scalability, might not always choose the most efficient route. Okay? Link state or distance vector, this is a path vector. So BGP is meant not to be used as an IGP. As a matter of fact, BGP depends on an IGP because BGP is not aware of its surroundings. So that's why you configure the IGP first. You need to have connectivity first, okay? You need to have connectivity. That's why the first thing you do, you put your IPs, you put your IGP, then you do your MPLS, then you do your BGP, okay? That's the whole deal with that. All right, now here are some commands that will go ahead and help you verify. Show IP BGP summary. All right, it shows you, hey, I look at my tables. Okay, who am I connected to? IGPB, show IPGB. Oh my God, BGP neighbors. All right, so you can take a look at who you're connected to. You can go specifically to this particular neighbor, show IP BGP route to this particular neighbor or this particular network, and debug IP BGP, what's running in the background. All right, these are show commands you need to be familiar with. You'll have this information, so you'll know. All right, so you can see what's going on, and you'll see it in the lab. All right, now this is interesting because maybe not a lot of people know this. All right, when you're doing your autonomous systems, BGP is kind of weird. All right, for 0, it's reserved. You can't use autonomous system 0. Okay. 1 through 64,495, that's assigned by the IANA for public use only. All right. You want something for reserved for use in documentation, 64 to 496 and 64 to 511. For private use, internal, all right, 64,512 to 65,534, 534. That's what you usually see, like in my lab or any labs out there. Everyone uses 65,001 or 65 something or 66, not 66, but a high number in that range. Okay, you can't use 1, you can't use 2. You could, I guess, if you're in a simulator internally, what have you. But if you're doing it on real routers and you are connected to the internet, do not try to use any one of these numbers here. And 65,535 is reserved. It's not funny, huh? That number keeps coming up. So 0 and 65,535 are reserved. Public, private. Okay? Public, private. Or public, private. The two white rows there. Public and private. All right? You need to be aware of those. You need to be aware of these. Okay? So BGP, there's a lot to it. Once we go and get into the lab, you'll understand. But you'll see BGP is huge. But for the purposes of your CCNA, you do not need to be a BGP expert. Because if you look at your Cisco Press book in the portion of eBGP, which is what you need to know, all right, it's not that big. There's not even any syntax on eBGP. Okay? I'll see you next. Hey everyone, well, here's your lab. Here's when we're talking about autonomous system paths, where they're going from an autonomous system 12 to autonomous system 2, that's eBGP. Autonomous system 2 to autonomous system 2, that's iBGP, right? You have autonomous system 2 to autonomous system 3, eBGP, iBGP, eBGP, eBGP, iBGP. That's all there's to that, okay? So what you're going to do is that you're going to configure IP connectivity, you're going to configure your IGP, and then you'll see when we do BGP, since once eBGP and once iBGP, you'll notice when we do the trace route, or the tracer, I should say, which trace route, which way it's going to go from ASN 12, let's say, to ASN 11. Will it go this way or will it go this way? Which way would be the shortest way to get there? See you inside the lab. All right, here we are inside our little fundamental BGP lab. Now, as you can see, is what we saw in the presentation. Here, this router is an autonomous system 11 for BGP. Here's autonomous system 1, these two right here. Okay, here's autonomous system 12. These two are autonomous system 2, and these two are autonomous system 3. So remember, if you're going, let's say, between these two, since they're in the same autonomous system, that means that they're in iBGP. If you're going between autonomous systems, like from 1 to 11, that's eBGP. All right, like 3 to 1, that's eBGP. 3 to 2, that's eBGP. And then 2 to 12, that's eBGP. All right. Now, like I said, BGP, where are we? We're in, no, we don't want to be in the router. See, autonomous system 12, that's router 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let me hit enter. When one of the things that we said in the presentation was that BGP cannot run by itself. You have to have an IGP already configured, have connectivity already configured. All right. BGP, I did configure it for you just to show you what it is. This is not a big deal. Show IP protocols. Okay. Now you see, forget about this application thing. That's something that Burl does. Routing protocol is OSPF. I decided to do OSPF. All right. Area 0. So everybody's running OSPF area 0. All right. If you were to look at the actual routing table, let's go enable Cisco show IP route. If you look at the routing table, you see a bunch of O's. You know, we have connectivity all over the place. All right. But let me do show protocols again. Hit a space bar. Here we're running BGP 12. Okay. And you see here that our neighbor is 192.168.100.2. If we were to do show IP BGP summary, to take a look at it quickly, you see we only have one neighbor. There is no connectivity between these two guys. So there's only a connectivity between here. Now that's an external. And you see that one of the things you need to look at is the state that it's in. If it's idle or active, something like that, then that's a problem. That means that, hey, it's actively looking for a neighbor, or 0 is not getting anything, it's not working, it's not making no neighbor relationships whatsoever. 0 basically just states, hey, nobody's sending me, sharing any information, so I have nothing to show you. Because if we were to look at the routing table for BGP, show IP BGP, we're not going to see anything. We're not going to see any best routes or anything like that. All right, but we can take a look at our summary of the neighbors that we have. Now, one of the things that leads us to, if you're within an IGP, because if you look, let me show you the configuration. Show start. Let's go down. Oh, too far. Okay, right here. You go router BGP 12. I actually hard coded the BGP router ID to my loopback of 12. All right, but I have to put the neighbor as the physical or the IP address on the physical interface, which is this. Why? Because it's external to me, to my autonomous system. It doesn't matter that we have an IGP running underneath. This is now we're doing BGP. So BGP doesn't know, because we're in totally different autonomous systems, what networks are here. So we need to create that neighbor by using the IP address on the physical interface. As you can see here, I put neighbor 192.168.100.2, remote AS2. And I also go into the address family for IPv4, and I put 192.168.100.2, and I activate that as well. If I wanted to also, since I am running OSPF, I can do a send community both. All right, if we were to start doing VRFs and all that, but that's with MPLS. If you have an MPLS course, you've seen that already. But I really didn't need to do this. All I really need to do was just this command right here. Okay? But just so you know that, if you're going from external autonomous systems, you must use the IP address on the physical interface of your neighbor, all right, and then put his remote AS. You cannot use the loopback. You cannot use the loopback address. Loopbacks, let me go to this route right here. This is the 5th router, I believe. All right, it's a totally different story. Totally different story. All right, Cisco, show start. It's not this huge configuration here. All right, enter. With iBGP is different. As you can see here, neighbor is 2221, remote AS2. 221 is the loopback of this particular router. All right, I'm in this router right now. This is where we're sitting right now, ASN2. Okay, this one here. And I'm telling you that my neighbor is 221. Well, we're internal. We're in the same autonomous system. So I will be aware of what network is there. Okay, so that is what you can do. And you can see that I have a neighbor, because I have 3 neighbors actually. I have 1, 2, and 3. If I'm this guy, so I have the physical IP address of this particular ASN1, and I have the physical IP address of this one. So if I were to do a show IP BGP summary, I should see three neighbors. The 2221, which is the loopback, which is this one. The physical interface of this particular router right here, and the physical interface of this particular router right here. It shows you the version. It shows you the autonomous system, how many messages have been received and sent, okay? The table version, all right? But there has been no in or out inquiries, or queries, I should say. And a zero, that's just fine. I mean, nobody's just not sharing anything with me. They have nothing to say to me, so they haven't sent me any information. That's why we see no routing table, okay? But what we did earlier, I said that if we didn't put any attributes in BGP, so if I go here, config T, and go router BGP, and this is BGP2, and I want to do a question mark, there's a whole bunch of things that we can do here, okay? If I wanted to do whatever, if you do BGP, all right, and look at all the different things that we can actually do, all right, to create, to manipulate what is it that we want BGP to actually do. So we're not worried about that at this point, except for the part that I just did, router ID. And that's one of the requirements, if you remember from the presentation, that's one of the requirements that, it would be good if you hard coded the router ID. And I did by using the loopback. So in our presentation, we were on this router. It said that it decided to take the autonomous system path this way to go here, right? Okay, so what I did was, and how you can verify that, all right, let me go here. Let's give it some space here. So we're going to trace 192.168.100.1 or 200.1, sorry, 200.1, which is this guy right here. And we're sourcing it from 192.168.200. No, silly man. 100.1. All right. Invalid source address. How can that be invalid? Show IP in brief. Show IP in brief. Oh, it's 100.2. What router am I in? Oh, I'm in the wrong router. That would help. Okay. There we are. Let's try this again. Trace 192.168.200.1, and we're going to source that from 192.168.100.1. And then you see that it's going to go to 100.2, which is right here, okay? And then it's going to go to the 172.31.2.1, which is right here. Then it's going to go to the 10.1.1.5, which is right here. And then it ends up at 201. So it does take this path right here, okay? Now, you can always change what you're sourcing it with, because I do have 12.12.12.12, and it's still going to give you the same thing. So we're sourcing from the loopback. It's going to take you that way. But again, the configuration of BGP, for at least the basics of it, it's not a big deal. The only thing that I want you to keep in mind, all right? Keep in mind, you should put in your router ID manually, all right? You hard code it in there. And if you're going from external BGPs, or autonomous systems, I should say, when you're going from different autonomous systems, which is external BGP, you have to look at your neighbor's IP address on the physical interface, because it's not aware of its network. So you need to tell it, okay? So you need to tell, hey, this is the IP address on the physical interface. And then you give it the remote AS that you want it to go to. That's not the same way that it works for iBGP. You can put the loopbacks because they're within the same autonomous system. But there you go. That's it. That's as far as it gets. And you'll get this configurations either in a text file or in the presentation that we'll upload. So you don't have to worry about it. Again, even in the certification exam, I don't think they're going to get that deep in, but we'll talk more about that when I'll see you guys outside the lab. Okay, that wasn't bad. We had to take our time though, because we were going from eBGP to iBGP. And remember, eBGP must use the IP addresses on the physical interface. Okay, must. iBGP, you can use both. Okay, you can use either the IP address on the physical interface or you can use the loopback address. But if you use the loopback address, what is it that you have to do? And I've said this before. You have to tell it, neighbor such and such, update update source, loopback 0 or whatever loopback it is. All right, so it knows, oh, okay, I'm using the loopback. Okay, if not, it's going to get confused. So remember that command, the update source loopback command. Okay, when you're doing it from the same autonomous system, which is iBGP. But that really wasn't so difficult. As you practice, you become more comfortable. If you've never done it before, it takes time. If you haven't done it in a long time, it'll come back to you. All right. There is your comparison between eBGP and iBGP. See you in the next one. Welcome, everyone. Now, this is as simple as it gets, this particular lab. All we're going to do is eBGP. You see this is 6501.001. This is 65002. All right. We're going to just make the most minimal commands required to get BGP running. So when you do your show IP BGP summary, you can see your table there and the best path to get to the network that it's trying to get to. I mean, 2 routers, minimal configuration. That way you understand what you need to do without having to look at 12 different routers. The other one was a comparison between BGP and iBGP, and it's actually showing you the autonomous path that it's taking. This one is just showing you a very simple little configuration of eBGP, which is what you really need to know. I'll see you in the lab. Welcome, everyone, to the most basic or minimal configuration that you could do for external BGP. Now remember, it's external BGP because we're going through different autonomous systems. If they were the same autonomous systems, then it would be internal BGP, right? And then one of the main differences is that with internal BGP, you do not need to use the IP addresses on the physical interfaces of the router, but you can use a loop back address. All you would need to do though is type in the neighbor, update source, loopback, and whatever the number of the loopback is, usually it's loopback 0 or loopback 1, whatever it is that you're using. So it would know. But other than that, we're going to use the physical or the IP address on the physical interfaces since we are going through external BGP. That is a requirement that you must use the IP address on physical interfaces. So now BGP, since this is the very, very, very first time you're going to configure it, BGP relies on an interior gateway protocol. So eIGRP, RIP, OSPF, whatever it is you're going to use. Okay, ISIS, whatever it is. Okay, but you need to have that IGP running. And we do. I'll go ahead and open the very first router here, router 1. And you can see I already did show IP protocols and is running the RIP routing protocol, the version 2, obviously. All right, and you're seeing that it's sent to, received to, all right, version 2. So we're running RIP version 2. And if you were to look at the routing table, show IP route, you will see that we're getting an update from the 2 network. And indeed, we have layer 3 connectivity to that particular network. You just gotta wait for the ARP. There's your pings. So now what we're going to do is configure BGP in this particular router. So we're going to do config T, router, BGP 65001. Enter. Then we're going to tell it, hey, there's our neighbor. Neighbor. Who's my neighbor? 10.1.1.6. All right. And my neighbor has a remote AS of 65001. Enter. Oh, that's right. Sorry, not 001, 002. This packet tracer, since we are learning about eBGP, it only supports eBGP. I've always said that the packet tracer is for the CCNA, is made for the CCNA. So since we have these new topics, hey, there you go. Okay, so now we have that neighbor relationship. But we also want to advertise the network in between. So network, and that's going to be the 10.1.1.4, and then 0.00. Not 0.00. I'm so used to mask 255.255.255.252. Oops, 252. That's it. That is the most basic of basics for BGP, so you can connect to an external autonomous system. So let's go ahead and go to router 2. All right, so we'll do the same thing here. Config T, router, BGP 65002, neighbor 10.1.1.5, 255.255.255. No. We are so used to the old neighbor, and then we go remote AS, and that AS is 65001. And you see it immediately came up. All right, but we're still going to advertise the network that we're in, which is the 10.1.1.4, with a mask of 255.255.255.252. Now, BGP is not the fastest protocol. It's pretty kind of slow, but you got to think about what BGP is doing. BGP is really used on major enterprises, ISPs. You really got to think about before you want to configure BGP in a small environment if you don't have a very beefy router, the Hulk type router that you would need, because BGP does store a lot of information. So if we look at our routing table, we see, hey, we have our routes. Okay, so we do show IP BGP. What do we see? And look at that. We see the best path, and that's what this means. Now, it takes time for it to update that this is a valid path to get to this particular network, okay, as the 6501. All right, and if you go to the other router, okay, should show you the same thing. Show IP BGP. And there you go. Best path is the 10.1.1.4. Okay, so to get to that particular router. So that's it. That's all BGP is about. What Cisco is trying to make you understand is the following. Okay, if you're going between different autonomous systems, it's external BGP. If you're going within internal autonomous systems, it's iBGP. And like I said earlier in the very beginning, iBGP, you can use your loopback addresses if you configure them, okay? And you need to do, because what happens is if you're using loopbacks, but they're sourcing the physical IP address, if they're within the same autonomous system, they're sourcing this address right here. So you need to tell it, neighbor 10.1.1.6, update source loopback is 0. And you do the same thing to the other router. Neighbor 10.1.1.5, update source loopback 0. So it knows to use the loopback addresses to create that particular path. But that's it. That is the basics, the very, very minimal basics of external BGP, which is what we just did. All right, I'll see you outside. All right, simple. I mean, it doesn't get any more simpler than that. I mean, this is certification purposes only. eBGP is what they want you to know. This is it. 2 different autonomous systems. Tell your neighbors who they are. I mean, that is it. That is really it. Advertise your network. You're done. You're done. All right. So it worked. We did our show IP BGP summary. You saw the best paths. It was there. Okay, guys. Remember, certification purposes, eBGP. Very simple. Anything else really goes beyond the scope of the book. But again, it just gives you more ammunition when you go to an interview. See you in the next. We've made it to the end of BGP. So let's summarize what we've talked about. All right, topics discussed. Most popular exterior gateway protocol in use today, BGP version 4. BGP neighbors do not need to be in the same subnet. They can be wherever because we use reflectors, right? So we can avoid certain routers like the provider routers. BGP is in capitalized. BGP uses tons of attributes. One of the things that they want you to learn in the certification is the path attribute, right? Which path is it taking? If they're exterior BGPs, all right, it's going to calculate, keep adding, putting that semicolon. Okay, well, I got how to go through this path, and how I got to go through this path, and how I got to go through this path. So the one with the lowest path wins. That's pretty much it. All right. And BGP is dependent on an iGP because it's not aware of its surroundings. All right. It needs an iGP to help it along. Okay. We also have the types of BGP. You already saw that, iBGP and BGP. You saw the difference between both of them. We looked at some show commands. Yes, we did. Show IP BGP summary, show IP BGP neighbors, show IP BGP Ceph, or show IP Ceph, looking at the Ceph table. All right. Learned about the different autonomous system numbers, which are the publics, which are the privates, right? That's why we normally use somewhere in the 6500 range. BGP configurations, very basic configurations of eBGP. You saw the comparison lab with the iBGP and eBGP, and BGP authentication. You could have. I've uploaded a resource there for you. If you want to go ahead and use it, that's fine. You can go ahead and practice with it beyond the scope of the certification. But you know me, I like to give you a little bit extra. At least it'll get you ready for the CCNP. Okay, so, but again, BGP authentication is not part of this certification. Doubtful you'll be configuring BGP, period. But at least you know how now, or you will know how after you go over the videos. And authentication definitely is not going to be there. But hey, the text file will be there for you if you need to do it. See you in the next.